My name is Emily Parker, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the second daughter no one really noticed. Not because I lacked effort or ability, but because from the moment my younger sister Madison was born, the spotlight never came back to me. We grew up in a well-off family in Seattle. Me dad, a civil engineer. My mum, a literature teacher, both strict and achievement-oriented. Yet somehow, they always leaned toward Madison. I still remember being 4, standing in the hospital room, clutching my teddy bear while everyone cooed over the new baby. My mum glanced at me, but the moment was fleeting. Madison cried, and her attention shifted immediately. The feeling of being replaced didn't arrive in one defining moment. It seeped in over years. The prettiest dress saved for Madison, birthday cakes with her name in bolder letters, praise for her colourful scribbles, while my straight-A report cards received a nod at best. I didn't blame my parents. I told myself I just wasn't as charming. Was bubbly and talkative. I was reserved and quiet. So I learned to step aside, with toys, with dessert, with affection. When I felt sad, my mother would say, "You're the older sister, be mature." But when Madison messed up, she'd say, "She's just a kid. She doesn't know better." That meant I had to be both grown-up and silent. The sense of being a supporting character in my own family haunted me into high school. When I made the national academic team, my parents were proud, but not as proud as they were when Madison won second place in a school talent show. "Girls who dance are more graceful," Mom said. "Grades don't matter if you can't connect with people," Dad added. I didn't argue. I kept excelling quietly. Even when I succeeded, I stepped back. I was afraid every time I shined, someone would pull me aside and whisper, "Let your sister have the moment." I thought college in another city would help me escape her shadow. And for a while, I did find space to breathe. But childhood wounds don't vanish. They wait until something stirs them again. I met Jason during my senior year of college at a marketing seminar in downtown Portland. It was pouring rain that day, and I was drenched when I bumped into him at the entrance. His coffee spilled all over my freshly printed notes. I hadn't even had time to be annoyed before he was apologizing, handing me tissues, looking genuinely embarrassed. "Can I make it up to you with dinner?" he asked, half smiling, half nervous. I laughed. Later, he told me it was that smile that hooked him. Dinner was simple, a local diner, casual talk, but something about him was different. He didn't just wait for his turn to speak, listened. For someone like me, who had always felt invisible, that meant everything. We started dating soon after. It wasn't flashy just walks by the river, quiet mornings with coffee and books, and warm hugs when I was stressed about deadlines. Jason wasn't loud or flashy, but he was consistent, kind, and present. He remembered my exam dates, texted me good luck, always bought the right kind of dark chocolate. He didn't make big promises, but his actions always included me. I remember thinking, maybe this time I've found someone who sees me. After graduation, we both got jobs in Portland and moved into a small apartment. 2 years later, he proposed at the same riverside spot where we'd had our first ice cream. The ring wasn't extravagant, but his eyes said everything when he asked, "Will you share forever with me?" I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was intimate. I had planned to have my best friend as maid of honor, but my mum suggested Madison should stand beside me. She'd be hurt otherwise, she said. So, like always, I gave in. Madison showed up in a tight white dress, just shy of looking like a bride herself. She was loud, dazzling, and stole attention without even trying. I stayed quiet. I told myself, this is still your day. After the wedding, Jason and I moved into his condo. He was still caring, still cooked dinner, still asked, "Are you okay?" every night. I finally felt safe, like I had built something for myself that couldn't be taken away. We didn't rush into kids. Jason said, "Let's settle into our careers. You've got dreams too." I agreed. I was happy, until things started to change subtly at first. He worked late more often. He began flipping his phone face down. When I called, he'd respond hours later with, "Just meetings, babe. Don't worry." But I did worry. Not from jealousy, just a gnawing intuition. The same feeling I knew all too well growing up. The sense that I was, once again, being edged out of my own story. I started noticing everything: the forced laughs, the locked laptop, the deleted browser history. My heart knew before my head accepted it. Something was wrong. I didn't confront Jason immediately. I watched, waited, gathered pieces like someone solving a puzzle they never wanted to finish. One evening, while working on a presentation, I borrowed his laptop because mine had crashed. That's when I saw the email subject line. Last night was incredible. The sender? Madison.87 at. I froze. My fingers trembled as I opened it, each word a knife carving away what little trust I had left. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I printed the emails. I hired a private investigator. I mapped every night he claimed to be working late. I wasn't doing it to save us. I needed clarity, proof for myself. I needed to reclaim my reality. When my 32nd birthday rolled around, my parents arranged a dinner at Seabrook Grill. My mum was unusually cheerful, repeating how Jason had insisted on being there despite his workload. I got dressed carefully: navy blue dress, loose curls, soft perfume. I told myself this could still be a good night. I arrived first. My mom fussed with napkins. My dad browsed the wine list. "Jason called. He's stuck in a meeting," my mom said, not looking up. I nodded, ignoring the way my stomach turned. 20 minutes later, I heard heels clicking and a laugh I knew too well. Madison walked in, radiant in a red bodycon dress, her arm looped through Jason's. I couldn't breathe. She smiled brightly. Ran into Jason in the parking lot. "Thought we'd come in together. Perfect timing, huh?" Jason avoided my eyes. "Happy birthday, Em. Sorry I'm late." I sat frozen, surrounded by people I loved, yet suddenly a stranger in my own celebration. Dinner continued, but every bite tasted like betrayal. Madison dominated the conversation, gushing about her new clients, her career, her future. Then, without warning, she placed a hand over her stomach and said, "Actually, I have some news. I'm pregnant." My mom gasped with joy. "That's wonderful. Who's the father?" Madison looked at me, then Jason. "It's Jason," she said softly. "Jason's the father." The air vanished from the room. My chest caved in. I stared at Jason, who couldn't even look up. I whispered, "I thought this was my birthday. Turns out it's your reveal party." Madison blinked, feigning guilt, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "I didn't mean for it to come out like this, but we couldn't hide it anymore," Jason muttered. "I'm sorry. This wasn't how I wanted you to find out." I stood up, my voice calm, hollow. "You mean this wasn't how you rehearsed it?" I walked toward the restroom, each step echoing louder than the last. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had just lost everything, but whose eyes were dry, whose spine was straight. I whispered to my reflection, "Don't cry. Not tonight. Not for them. Tonight is your birthday, not your funeral." I stood in that restaurant bathroom for nearly 10 minutes, staring into the mirror, unmoving, no tears, no screams, no collapsing like a woman in a melodrama. Just silence, a silence so deep it felt like the closing of a door I didn't know I'd left open. Then came clarity, sudden and sharp. All the late nights, the quiet phone calls, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't my night all snapped into place. They thought I didn't know, but the truth was, I had known. I'd known 3 months ago when Jason started locking his phone. I wasn't jealous, I was intuitive. One night, while using his laptop to prepare a slide deck, An email popped up. Last night was amazing. It was from Madison. I didn't react right away. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding, then clicked it open. What I read shattered me. Still, I said nothing. I didn't accuse him. I didn't throw things. I began gathering. I printed emails, hired a private investigator, documented every lie. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. I walked back to the table, reapplied my lipstick, and sat down like nothing had changed. The dinner continued awkwardly, my mother forcing smiles, my father sipping wine in silence, Madison glowing with her secret now made public. Jason glanced at me, bracing for a meltdown. But I had other plans. I lifted my glass and looked directly at Madison. "Are you certain the baby is Jason's?" The table fell silent. Madison blinked. "What do you mean?" I smiled, cool, calm, final. "Because if you are, you might want to check again. Jason had a vasectomy 2 years ago. My mother coughed in shock. Jason paled. Madison froze. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document, a signed medical certificate confirming Jason's vasectomy, complete with the clinic's seal and date. We discussed not having children. It was mutual. He had the procedure and spent a week recovering. Remember the time he stayed home with an ice pack and said he threw out his back? Jason opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to Madison, no longer seeing my sister just, a woman who took everything without apology. "So, if you're pregnant, it's not his. Did you know that? Or are you just a pawn in your own lie?" Madison stood, her face ghost white. "You're humiliating me in front of our family?" "No," I said. "I'm just correcting the narrative. You chose the wrong audience for your big announcement." Jason whispered. I didn't know she wasn't sure. I looked at him, the man who once promised to protect me, and asked, "Did you know you were being used to destroy your wife?" He said nothing. Madison backed away, knocking over her chair. "I don't need your approval. I made a mistake, but I never expected you to twist it like this." I rose from my seat. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine." I thanked everyone for dinner, tucked the document into my coat, and walked out without looking back. I had carried years of silence in my bones, but not anymore. That night, I didn't just walk away from a marriage. I walked back to myself. I left the restaurant that night in the same heels I had carefully chosen for my birthday. Only now, each step sounded louder, firmer, like I was finally walking away from the weight I had carried for too long. I didn't go home. That apartment, that bed, that kitchen, they weren't mine anymore. They were soaked in betrayal. Instead, I called Claire, my best friend from college. "Can I crash at your place for a few days?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I've got tea and cookies waiting. Come over." The next morning, I went to the office of the divorce attorney I had quietly contacted 2 months earlier. Back then, I wasn't sure I had the strength. But now, I didn't need more time. I needed closure. "I'd like to file immediately," I said, sliding the folder of documents across the desk. The attorney nodded without asking for the story. "You're more prepared than most," she said. I didn't reply. I just exhaled. A few days later, when Jason was at work, I returned to the apartment to collect my things, just what was mine. I didn't take anything we had chosen together. I left my wedding ring on the vanity with a single note. "You didn't just lose a wife. You lost the only person who ever believed in you without conditions." Then I walked out and never turned back. I moved into Claire's spare room. We cooked simple dinners, folded laundry together, went grocery shopping like roommates. It felt strange at first my world had crumbled, but somehow I was still functioning. Jason tried to reach me texts, emails, voicemails. At first, they were apologies, then justifications, then blame. I was confused. You were distant. Can't we talk? I didn't respond. I had nothing more to say. Madison, I heard from my mom, had spiraled after the dinner. The baby's real father, a married manager from her office, had cut her off completely, threatened her if she ever contacted him again. My mother sobbed on the phone. "She made a mistake, but she's still your sister." I said nothing. For years I had wished my mother would defend me just once when I was wronged, belittled, or forgotten. She never did, and now I no longer needed her to. I simply answered, "I don't hate Madison, but I can't keep pretending nothing happened." I found a small apartment across town. Sunlight poured through the windows, and it was near a bookstore I loved. Jason used to call it too noisy and bad energy, but to me it felt like air. I bought white curtains, 2 little potted plants, and hung a painting of a woman standing in the ocean wind, her eyes steady, her hair wild. For the first time in years, I had space that belonged entirely to Menno shadows. No compromises, no masks. I returned to work, took on more projects, even signed up for a leadership course I had long postponed. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself. I was simply peeling away the layers that had buried me. One quiet afternoon, while working at a nearby cafe, I received a message from Madison. "I know I hurt you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But if there's ever a day you feel ready to talk, I'll be here." I didn't respond. I closed my laptop and watched the sun pouring onto the pavement. For the first time in a long time, my heart felt still. Not because I forgot, but because I had finally let go. 1 year passed since that unforgettable birthday dinner, or maybe I should call it the night. Everything finally cracked open. I stood in front of the mirror in my little apartment, which no longer felt temporary or lonely. The bookshelves were full, the succulents I nearly killed twice were now thriving, and the painting of the woman in the wind still hung above the couch. But today, I didn't see storm clouds in her eyes. I saw peace. I had just turned 33. No family gathering, no cake with "Happy Birthday Big Sis" scrawled in frosting, and I didn't need it. Instead, I organised a small dinner with a few close friends and co-workers. Among them was Ryan, a quiet analyst from my office who had once left a sticky note and a coffee on my desk after a long meeting that had left me emotionally drained. We weren't dating, not officially, but he listened. He noticed. He waited. We took walks, watched old movies, shared silence without discomfort. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to label it. It just felt whole. The divorce had finalized 6 months earlier. Jason didn't fight it. He didn't even apologize in the end. Perhaps because he finally understood some damage can't be undone. He moved to Denver for work. Occasionally my mum would mention him, always with a wistful sigh. He had his good moments. I never argued. I simply smiled. The pain had passed, not forgotten, but no longer raw. Madison gave birth to a boy. She named him Noah. He looked nothing like Jason, and a paternity test had long confirmed what I already knew. The biological father never showed up, though eventually sent financial support after legal pressure. Madison moved back in with my parents, kept a low profile, and stopped posting her highlight reel online. 3 months ago, she mailed me a letter, handwritten, shaky. It wasn't an apology dressed as an excuse. It was vulnerable, unfiltered. She wrote, "I've always envied how you lived with honesty. I was too busy trying to prove I was worth loving." I read it twice, then sat in silence. I thought I couldn't forgive her. And maybe I still hadn't. But that letter didn't soften. Made me see her clearly for the first time. Not the golden child, not the rival, just a broken girl chasing approval in all the wrong ways. One Sunday, I visited my parents. Madison was there, rocking her baby on the couch, dark circles under her eyes, but a softness I hadn't seen before. She looked up, startled. "I didn't think you'd come." "If you want your son to grow up different than we did, start by being real with yourself. You don't have to take from anyone. You've always been enough." Madison burst into tears. I didn't rush to hug her, but I stayed. I made a bottle. I folded a blanket. We barely spoke, but maybe that's what healing looks like, sometimes less about words, more about presence. My relationship with my parents remained civil, but I no longer sought their approval like a starving child. My father once pulled me aside and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see how much you needed love instead of pressure." I nodded. That alone was enough. At work, I was promoted to team leader role I'd once doubted I was bold enough to handle. But I learned that leadership doesn't always come from volume. Sometimes it's born in resilience, in empathy. I was no longer the forgotten sister, the abandoned wife, or the invisible daughter. I was Emily Parker, a woman who had broken, rebuilt, and returned not to prove anything, but simply to live honestly. The night of my 33rd birthday, as my small circle of friends raised their glasses in a cozy wine bar tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, I felt something I hadn't felt in years likeness. No stage to perform on, no roles to fulfill, no competition to endure, just laughter, warmth, and space to exist as I was. Ryan handed me a small cloth-bound notebook wrapped in twine. On the cover, embossed in gold, were the words, "Strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising with your heart still open." I laughed softly, running my fingers over the texture. It wasn't flashy, but it was thoughtful, just like him. I didn't know what our future held, and for the first time, I wasn't desperate to define it. I had learned that not every chapter needed to be about someone else. Some stories are meant to be yours alone. I walked home that night beneath the quiet hum of street lamps and a sky brushed with stars, and I realized my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had spent too many years measuring my worth by how others saw me. The daughter who had to be responsible, the sister who had to step aside, the wife who had to stay quiet to keep the peace. But now, I knew better. I had reclaimed the narrative. I had looked betrayal in the eye and walked away with dignity. I had stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer a bandage. I had chosen silence when chaos begged for noise. And in doing so, I had rediscovered my voice. Somewhere along the way, I had forgiven not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I had made room in my life, not for revenge, but for renewal. I was no longer trying to be seen. I was learning to see myself. That night, as I placed the notebook on my bedside table, I whispered a promise-not to anyone else, but to the woman in the mirror who had finally come home to herself. Whatever happens next, I will not forget who I am. I will not shrink to make others feel bigger. I will not bend just to avoid breaking. I will live fully, fiercely, freely. Emotional closing summary. Final message for the video. Approx 300 words. Some betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the ones we once held closest, the ones who knew where our softest parts lived and chose to cut anyway. Emily's story isn't just about infidelity or family betrayal. It's about what happens when a woman stops shrinking herself to fit the silence others gave her. It's about rediscovering worth not through someone else's eyes, but in her own reflection. She could have chosen revenge. She could have screamed, shattered, disappeared. But instead, she chose clarity. Dignity, freedom, that is not weakness, it's power. The kind of quiet, unshakable power that rises from knowing who you are after the world has tried to convince you you're nothing. To anyone who has ever been cast as the side character in their own story, to the daughters who were asked to be strong too early, to the women told to understand while others got away with cruelty, this is your reminder. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. You are not too much. You are not too quiet. You are not here to be convenient. Let Emily's journey be a mirror for your own healing. You don't need a dramatic ending to reclaim your peace. Sometimes it begins with a single stepper bag, packed, a door closed, a deep breath that says, I choose me. If this story touched something in your heart, share your thoughts below. We read every single comment. Like this video if you've ever walked away from what broke you. And don't forget to subscribe. Share real stories for real people healing just like you. No matter where you are in your journey, may you always find the courage to come home to yourself.